Think for a second about how inventions like the wheel have completely changed the world. We went from moving place to place with horses and carriages to cross-country trains, from steam engines to gas cars, from planes to commercial spaceships. The entire human experience has been changed and changed again thanks to the wheel, and other inventions like agriculture or penicillin, or even counting. Yup, even though counting can feel natural to us humans, we've really invented lots of different ways to do it. And like many significant innovations throughout history, different counting systems sprung up around the world based on the different needs of our day-to-day lives. Even the tools we all use in our different parts of the world have had their own life-changing evolution. There's not one right way to count, and each strategy has expanded our understanding of counting and the world. In math, we've built on these strategies to make our ideas and what we can do with counting more precise, and to handle larger and larger amounts of information. Today, we're going to talk about how different cultures have innovated counting for their own needs, the fundamental principle of counting, and how many ways you could take a self-care vacation. I don't know about you, but I'm excited to see how all that fits together. I'm Jason Guglielmo, and this is Study Hall Real World College Math. One of the main things we can do with our counting skills is keep track of how much stuff we have, and societies around the world have created a variety of tools to make that easier. But no matter where we are, when we're only worried about a couple of things, it's easy to just use our bodies to keep track. For instance, in the US, it's common to count small numbers, like 5, by using one hand, and counting each finger individually. But then if we need to go beyond 5, in the US or Europe, we would just move on to our other hand until we reach 10 and then start over to count even higher. But like evolutionary anthropologist Dorsa Amir points out, even though finger counting is common across cultures worldwide, there are many ways to use our fingers and the rest of our body for counting numbers larger than 5 that varies based on where you grew up. For instance, the toes get in on the action in parts of the Americas, Africa, and Papua New Guinea, so that we can count 20 things. And there are many schools in India where they count using the knuckles on each finger. So we could count up to 40 without needing pen and paper. But even with fingers, toes, knuckles, and more, at some point we ran into quantities that were too large to count with our bodies, and we had to keep innovating our counting tools. As early as 25,000 BCE, the Ishango bone, a carved bone with 168 single-line markings on it, was used in what is now the Democratic Republic of Congo. It's widely believed to be one of the first counting tools, and was used either for arithmetic, as a calendar, or to create a base 10 number system like we use today. Or we could check out the abacus, which was a device usually made out of wood with a frame that holds multiple rods with free sliding beads attached to them, for engineers and businessmen to keep track of how much stuff they had. We got one right there. Like the Ishango bone, we can't say for sure when it was invented. There are examples of an early abacus from around 200 CE in both China and the ancient Roman Empire, but some sources say it was created about 1,000 years earlier. Basically, people everywhere needed to make sense of different quantities in their lives, and so invented tools to help make sense of counting. Nowadays, we're still relying on counting for major tasks, like keeping track of millions of pounds of fruit and vegetables, generating power for tons of homes, and running computers that count very large numbers in almost effortless ways. And while physical tools are still helpful, a lot of our best counting tools are actually more of ideas. Like say you just got your passport, and you're planning your first solo trip as a little mental health getaway. You're considering Vancouver, Canada, Sedona, Arizona in the United States, and Cabo San Lucas in Mexico as your destination, and you could go to any one of those cities by plane, car, or train. And since this is a theoretical trip, let's dream big and imagine money's not a problem for once. So you have 3 destinations, and 3 ways of getting to each of those destinations. To see all of the options, we could just list out every single combination and then count them up. Fortunately, Thought Cafe is going to list them for me because that's a lot. In total, there are 9 ways you could make this vacation happen. But the list out all the options and count them up method of counting is rather tedious and leaves a lot of room for us to accidentally miss an option. And we didn't even consider where you're going to stay while on this vacation. So now let's say you could stay at a hotel or an Airbnb, which means you now have even more options for how your trip could unfold. The more information we add, the easier it can be to get lost in the details. So let's take a spin on an old classic, drawing a picture. Now I personally wanted to draw a picture of a cute little baby seal from Stanley Park in Vancouver, but it's more helpful if we make a tree diagram instead. This is a visual tool for counting that can help us see all of our options. In general, a tree diagram looks like its name. like a tree with layers of branches representing each category we're considering and the options in each category. For our tree diagram, the first category we're considering includes all of the destination options. So we write each of those out, with some vertical space in between them to make the anchor for our tree diagram. Then, no matter which destination you choose, you'll always have 3 options for your mode of transportation: plane, car, or train. So we can make 3 branches off of each destination to show the 3 transportation options. Then, for each transportation option, make 2 more branches that show both housing options, Airbnb or hotel. Each option we have for our trip is represented by a branch that we can read from left to right. For instance, we can follow one branch and see that Vancouver by plane with an Airbnb is one vacation option. And voila! When we consider housing options and count up all the branches, there are now 18 vacation options. And with a systematic tree diagram, we're certain we didn't miss any. Now, we didn't have to start our decision-making process with the destination. We could organize each layer of this tree diagram however we wanted. This is because at each layer of the diagram, we have a decision to make that is independent, or doesn't depend on the other decisions. Whether you want to travel by plane, train, or car has nothing to do with where you choose to stay. It doesn't matter what we start with as long as we're always writing out all of the options for each layer. We'll still end up with 18 branches. But just like the tediousness of writing out the list, it's not always worthwhile to draw an entire tree diagram, especially if you have more choices to choose from. Which brings us to the last counting method. Let's go back to considering just 2 categories, like earlier when we just focused on destination and transportation. We have 3 destinations and 3 ways of getting to each of those destinations. Well, that's kind of like multiplication. 3 times 3 is 9, and we can confirm with our tree diagram that if we just stuck with the destination and transportation, we'd have 9 options. Then when we factor in lodging, we had 2 additional options for each of those 9 destination/transportation combos. 9 times 2 is 18, which gives us our total number of trip options. So we can actually count the number of possible vacation options using multiplication. In fact, what we're doing here is called the fundamental counting principle. And it's another tool like the abacus or the Ashango bone that mathematicians invented to make sense of counting. Basically, the fundamental counting principle says that if we have independent decisions to make, or events, we can multiply the number of options we have for multiple events, and in the end get the total number of possible outcomes. In formal math lingo, the fundamental counting principle goes like this. If an event can occur in m different ways, and another event can occur in n different ways, then the total number of ways those events can happen in the given order is m times n. And even though that definition only thinks about 2 events, we can use it to find the total number of options for more than 2 events, just like what we did with figuring out how many options you have for your self-care vacation. Which means, unlike listing out all the options or drawing a tree diagram, the fundamental counting principle is super helpful for situations where we have lots and lots of decisions or events. For instance, we can use the fundamental counting principle to understand how some states can issue seemingly endless amounts of unique license plates. Say we have a 6-character license plate with 3 restrictions. The first 3 characters must be digits, the last 3 characters must be letters, and the first digit cannot be 0. So the first character of a license plate has 9 options. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, or 9. The second character has 10 options. 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, or 9. The third character also has 10 options, 0 through 9. The fourth character has 26 options to choose from, A through Z, and the same goes for the 5th character and the 6th character. Trying to count out each possible license plate 6-character combination is exhaustive, and could easily take the rest of our lives to count out. But we have the fundamental counting principle as a tool that tells us we could just multiply 9 by 10 by 10 by 26 by 26 by 26 and get 15,818,400 possible license plates. That's a lot of license plates, but it isn't enough for all of the registered vehicles on the road today. As of 2021 in the US, there are nearly 284 million cars on the road. The solution was to let every state have its own set of restrictions for what counts as a license plate number, and some states decided to add an extra character. So instead of a 6-character license plate, now it's a 7-character license plate. Ultimately, whether our tools are physical or ideas, counting is a human innovation that's revolutionized how we understand quantities. Without a number system, or counting, we wouldn't be able to answer many fundamental questions about the world, like how much, how many, how far, or how long. And with the help of precise math language, we'll keep innovating and expanding what we can do with basic counting. Knowing the answers to those fundamental questions lets us know how much of anything we are working with, so we can make the best choices for our needs. Whether it's keeping track of how many days until the rainy season so we can plan our crops accordingly, or wanting to know how many ways you can book a much-needed vacation. Either way, thousands of years of counting will help us find our answers. Next time, we'll continue exploring what we can do with counting and the fundamental counting principle when we dive into permutations. Thanks for watching Study Hall, Real World College Math, which is produced by Arizona State University and the Crash Course team at Complexly. If you liked this video, give us a like and subscribe. You can learn more about ASU and the videos produced by Crash Course in the links in the description. See you next time.